turning points that changed the modern world. The Meiji Restoration. 1868. How Japan rebuilt itself to survive the West. In the summer of 1853, people near Edo Bay looked out toward the water and saw something that seemed almost unreal. 4 foreign warships had appeared off the coast of Japan. They were huge, dark, smoke-breathing machines, moving without sails, carrying cannon, steel, and the message of a world that had already changed. To the people watching from shore, these ships looked like floating castles. To the Tokugawa government, they looked like a warning. The commander was Matthew Perry, an American naval officer. He did not come as a tourist. He did not come to politely ask Japan to join the world. He came with steam power, guns, and a letter demanding that Japan open its ports. He did not come to politely ask Japan to join the world. He came with steam power, guns, and a letter demanding that Japan open its ports. For more than 2 centuries, Japan had tried to control contact with the outside world. It was not completely sealed off, but it was carefully guarded. The Dutch were allowed to trade in Nagasaki. Chinese merchants came under restrictions. Foreign religion, foreign weapons, and foreign influence were treated as dangers. That system had worked for a long time. But now, outside Japan, the world had become industrial. Steamships crossed oceans. Empires carved up Asia. China had already been forced open by Britain during the Opium Wars. Western powers were looking for markets, coal stations, treaty ports, and strategic footholds. Japan could see what had happened to other countries, and suddenly, the question facing Japan was brutally simple. Could an old feudal order survive in a world of steamships and cannon? The first reaction was fear, then anger, then confusion. Some Japanese leaders wanted to expel the foreigners. Others knew that if Japan fired on these ships, more would come. Perry's squadron was not the whole Western threat. It was only the first knock on the door. The Tokugawa shogunate faced an impossible choice. If it resisted, Japan might be crushed. If it gave in, it would look weak. And in a political system built on the shogun's ability to keep order, weakness could be fatal. For over 250 years, the Tokugawa shoguns had ruled Japan from Edo. The emperor remained in Kyoto, surrounded by ceremony and sacred authority, but real political power belonged to the shogun. Under the shogun were the daimyo, the regional lords who ruled their own domains. Beneath them stood the samurai, the warrior class. They carried swords, received stipends, and lived according to a social order that seemed ancient and permanent. It was a system designed for stability. Daimyo were forced to spend alternate years in Edo, leaving family members behind in what was essentially a political hostage system. Roads, castles, ceremonies, and obligations all served one purpose: prevent rebellion. And for generations, it worked. Japan avoided large civil wars. Cities grew, commerce expanded, literacy spread. Samurai became bureaucrats as much as warriors. Merchants became wealthy, even though they ranked low in official status. But the peace machine had a hidden weakness. It was built to control internal rivals, not foreign empires. It knew how to stop a daimyo from rebelling. It did not know how to stop a steam navy. In 1854, the shogunate signed the Treaty of Kanagawa with the United States. Later treaties opened more ports and gave foreign powers privileges that many Japanese saw as humiliating. Foreigners gained treaty rights. Tariffs were limited. Japan could not fully control its own trade. These were called unequal treaties, and they struck at the heart of the shogunate's legitimacy. For centuries, the shogun claimed to defend Japan. But now, when black ships arrived, the shogun signed. Across the country, samurai asked a dangerous question. If the shogun cannot protect the country, why should he rule it? A slogan began to spread. Sono Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. At first, it sounded like a simple answer. Bring power back to the emperor. Drive out the foreigners. Restore Japan's honor. But reality was far harsher than anyone had imagined. The dream of restoration met the smoke of modern warfare. Some domains tried to act on the slogan. Choshu forces fired on foreign ships passing through the Shimonoseki Strait. Western powers responded with military force. Satsuma clashed with the British after the killing of a British merchant, and British warships bombarded Kagoshima. These defeats taught Japan's anti-foreign warriors a lesson they could not ignore. Courage was not enough. A sword could not stop a shell. A castle could not defeat a steamship. If Japan wanted to survive the West, it first had to learn from the West. This is one of the great ironies of the Meiji Restoration. Many of the men who helped overthrow the shogunate began with the dream of expelling foreigners. But after seeing Western power up close, they changed the question. Not how do we keep the West out, but how do we become strong enough that the West cannot dominate us? That shift changed Japanese history. Two domains became especially important: Satsuma in the south and Choshu in the west. They had once been rivals. Both had suffered from Western power. Both had strong samurai leadership. Both understood that the Tokugawa order was losing control. With the help of political brokers and reform-minded samurai, Satsuma and Choshu formed an alliance. Their goal was not merely to complain about the shogun. Their goal was to replace the political system itself. In 1867, the last Tokugawa shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, returned power to the emperor. But power is rarely surrendered cleanly. In 1868, fighting broke out between forces loyal to the old shogunate and forces claiming to act in the emperor's name. This became the Boshin War. The new imperial forces won. A young emperor, Mutsuhito, became the symbolic center of a new age. That age would be called Meiji, enlightened rule. A young emperor, Mutsuhito, became the symbolic center of a new age. That age would be called Meiji, enlightened rule. Real power rested with a small group of ambitious leaders, many from Satsuma and Choshu, who understood that Japan had to be rebuilt from the center outward. They faced a problem larger than replacing one ruler with another. They had to turn a patchwork of domains into a nation-state. They had to turn samurai retainers into citizens. They had to turn rice taxes into a modern budget. They had to turn domain armies into a national army. They had to turn Japan from a country that had been forced open into a country that could negotiate with the world as an equal. This meant doing something revolutionary. The new government had to destroy the very class system that had helped bring it to power. In 1869, daimyo were pressured to return their lands and people to the emperor. In 1871, the old domains were abolished and replaced with prefectures governed from the center. Imagine what this meant. For centuries, a daimyo's domain had been his world. His castle town, his samurai, his tax base, his inherited authority. Now Tokyo said, all of this belongs to the state. The map of Japan was redrawn not as a feudal hierarchy, but as a centralized country. This was one of the most important acts of the Meiji government. Without it, Japan could not modernize as one state. It would remain a collection of regional powers, too divided to resist foreign pressure. But centralization came at a price. The samurai class began to lose its privileges. Their stipends were reduced and converted. Their exclusive right to carry swords was ended. Their top-knots disappeared. Their identity, once tied to honor and service, suddenly seemed like a relic from another age. The Meiji leaders were not simply modernizing buildings and uniforms. They were changing what it meant to be Japanese. A farmer's son could be drafted into the army. A samurai could become unemployed. A child could be sent to a modern school. A local lord could become a noble pensioner in Tokyo. The old world did not vanish peacefully. Some former samurai felt betrayed. They had fought to restore imperial rule, and now the new imperial government was dismantling their way of life. The most dramatic symbol of this anger was Saigo Takamori. Saigo had been one of the great figures of the Restoration, a man from Satsuma admired for his courage and moral force. But he became disillusioned with the direction of the new government. In 1877, former samurai in Satsuma rose in rebellion. This was not just a military revolt, it was the old warrior class making its final stand against the modern state it had helped create. The government defeated them with a conscript army. That detail matters. The samurai rebellion was crushed not by a feudal army of hereditary warriors, but by a national army made up of ordinary men. In that moment, Japan crossed a line. The sword-bearing order was over. The modern state had won. The Meiji slogan became Fukoku Kyohei, rich country, strong army. Those 4 words captured the logic of the era. Japan needed wealth, because military power required industry, railways, shipyards, taxes, factories, and technology. Japan needed a strong army, because without military power, wealth could be taken away by foreign powers. And Japan needed a central government because scattered domains could not build a modern nation. So the government moved quickly. It created a national conscription system. Military service would no longer be the exclusive duty of samurai. In theory, all men owed service to the nation. It reformed land taxes, requiring money instead of rice, giving the government more stable revenue. It promoted education because modern armies and modern factories needed literate citizens. It hired foreign experts, engineers, teachers, military advisors, legal specialists, and industrial technicians came to Japan. Japanese students went abroad, and in 1871, the Iwakura mission left Japan for the United States and Europe. This delegation included top officials, young students, and future leaders. They traveled across industrial societies, studied governments, factories, schools, banks, armies, and constitutions. They also tried to revise the unequal treaties. They failed at that immediate goal. But the failure taught them something. The West would not treat Japan as equal simply because Japan asked politely. Japan would have to become the kind of state the Western powers respected. So the Meiji leaders studied not only Western machines, but Western institutions. They looked at Britain's navy, Germany's army, France's legal systems, American education, Prussian constitutional structure. But Japan did not simply copy the West. This is important. The Meiji Restoration was not a surrender of Japanese identity. It was selective borrowing under pressure. The government adopted Western uniforms, weapons, schools, railways, factories, ministries, and legal codes. But it placed them under the authority of the emperor. The emperor became the sacred symbol of national unity. In the old order, loyalty had often been local, to one's lord, one's domain, one's status group. In the Meiji order, loyalty was redirected upward toward the emperor and the nation. This gave Japan a powerful emotional center while it modernized. A child in school learned not only reading and arithmetic, but also loyalty to the state. A soldier in uniform served not a local daimyo, but the emperor. A bureaucrat in Tokyo governed not a feudal domain, but a national prefecture. A farmer paying taxes now funded a central government that wanted factories, railways, and battleships. Every part of society was pulled into the project. Modernization was not abstract. It entered daily life. Haircuts changed, clothing changed, calendars changed, architecture changed, cities changed. Tokyo, once Edo, became the imperial capital and the symbol of the new Japan. Railways connected places that had once felt distant. Telegraph lines carried messages faster than any messenger on foot or horse. Newspapers spread new ideas. Factories produced silk, textiles, weapons, and ships. At the same time, the reforms created suffering. Farmers struggled with cash taxes. Former samurai lost status and income. Workers faced harsh conditions in early factories. Westernization produced anxiety as well as excitement. The Meiji Restoration was not a smooth miracle. It was a forced transformation. It was a national emergency turned into a political project. And because it moved so quickly, it was full of contradictions. Japan wanted to be modern, but also preserve imperial tradition. It wanted to learn from the West, but not be controlled by the West. It wanted constitutional government, but not full popular democracy. It wanted national strength, but that strength would eventually be used against others. In 1889, Japan promulgated the Meiji Constitution. The next year, the Imperial Diet opened. To outside observers, Japan now looked increasingly like a modern constitutional state. It had ministries, a cabinet, a parliament, courts, a modern military, and a national school system. But political power remained limited. The emperor stood at the center of sovereignty. The military held special status. The oligarchs who had built the state still shaped its direction from behind the scenes. This was modernization, but not liberal democracy in the modern sense. It was a state built for survival, unity, and power. And it worked. By the late 19th century, Japan had transformed faster than almost any country in the world. In 1853, Japan faced American ships with little ability to resist. By the 1890s, Japan had a modern army and navy. In 1894 and 1895, Japan defeated Qing China in the First Sino-Japanese War, shocking East Asia. In 1904 and 1905, Japan defeated Russia, a European empire, in the Russo-Japanese War, shocking the world. For many people across Asia, Japan's rise seemed to prove that a non-Western country could modernize and stand up to imperial powers. But Japan's success also carried a darker consequence. The country that had once feared being dominated began to dominate others. Korea became the center of rivalry and pressure. Taiwan became Japan's colony after the war with Qing China. Korea was annexed in 1910. The Meiji project had begun as a struggle for survival. But survival turned into expansion. This is why the Meiji Restoration matters so much. It was not just a Japanese domestic reform. It changed the balance of power in East Asia. It showed that Western imperialism could be resisted, but it also showed that modernization under military pressure could produce a new imperial power. Japan escaped colonization, not by rejecting the modern world, but by remaking itself quickly enough to compete inside it. That is the central drama of 1868. Japan did not look at the black ships and simply say, "We must return to the past." It looked at them and eventually said, "We must become strong enough that no one can do this to us again." That decision required sacrifice. It meant breaking the domains. It meant ending the samurai order. It meant taxing farmers. It meant sending children to school. It meant building an army from commoners. It meant studying foreign governments while claiming loyalty to an ancient emperor. It meant changing the state before the state was destroyed from outside. The Meiji Restoration was a political revolution disguised as restoration. It claimed to restore imperial rule, but in practice it created a new kind of Japan. A centralized Japan, an industrializing Japan, a militarized Japan. A Japan that could negotiate, fight, expand, and reshape Asia. When Perry's black ships appeared in 1853, they revealed Japan's weakness. When the Meiji state emerged after 1868, it turned that weakness into a national mission. The great question was never simply whether Japan should open or close. The real question was whether Japan could rebuild itself before the age of empire swallowed it. The answer was yes. But the price of that answer would echo far beyond Japan. It would echo through China, Korea, Russia, the Pacific, and the 20th century. That is why the Meiji Restoration belongs among the great turning points that changed the modern world. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more incredible stories from history.